Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, viewers. Continuing with our subject on how an economy works and the importance of an economic system to any society or economy that is involved in the process of solving its basic economic problem, I would like to start today's session or episode with a detailed discussion of contemporary economic systems. As we saw, economies evolved over time historically, and the way it functions today is much advanced, much developed compared to the way economies used to function or operate in earlier times. In today's world, most countries fit into one of four economic systems: the traditional economy, market economy, which is also called capitalism, command economy, and mixed economy. Traditional economy is not as widely prevalent today as it used to be earlier. It is still found in not so developed areas or districts or villages of a lot of parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia, but it's not very widely prevalent, usually in tribal societies. As the name suggests, traditional economy depends on or rests on certain traditions, customs, conventions, sometimes moral values, or ancestral practices that are carried on from one generation to another. The economic decisions, then, of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce are based on tradition. Market economy, or capitalism as it is called, is found in a number of countries, and USA is taken as the most typical example of a market economy. One of the most important tenets or points in a market economy feature is the operation of the free market forces of demand and supply. That's like the basis or the foundation on which a market economy rests. These forces of demand and supply are then importantly linked to price, which is determined in a certain market by the forces of demand and supply. Price mechanism is a kind of stabilizing or equilibrating force, whether it is factor markets or product markets. Profit in a market economy acts as a guiding mechanism or signaling device. Industries or production ventures which are more profitable will bring in more businessmen or attract more firms, and profit will be stabilized as firms enter. Loss-making industries and loss-making ventures will cause businessmen to avoid, new firms to avoid that industry, and the existing firms to leave the industry. So profit acts as a signaling device, not only for businessmen and producers, but also for resource owners. For example, workers. Workers would try to, students would try to adopt those skills, and workers would try to use those industries and firms for income, which are profitable industries. Now, the market economy as a system, or capitalism as a system, importantly rests on Adam Smith's doctrine, Adam Smith's theory, where he laid a lot of emphasis to self-interest, free market forces, laissez-faire, government non-intervention. Self-interest, again, is, as we said, if taken very literally, can be useful and hazardous at the same time. Competition can lead to efficiency, but at times it is not enough to ensure equitable distribution, to ensure human values and humanitarian objectives. Moving on to planned economy or a command economy. A planned economy is a centrally directed economy. Again, the important basis in a planned economy is a central planning authority, or the authority that gives the commands, that places the orders, so to say, for the economy to function. In small traditional societies, it could be in the form of a despot, a ruler, an administrator, an emperor. And in modern countries, huge economies of today, It can take the form of socialist or communist system, where a central planning authority or a government or state with government party in power and various ministers may be taking the decisions. In either case, there is centralization of economic power and centralization of decision. There is public ownership of property, which is in the hands of the government. So the government owns, controls, manages property. Decisions with respect to economic activities, decisions with respect to process of consumption, production, distribution, importantly rest in the hands of the state or the government or the central planning authority. Mixed economy is a combination of a market economy, which is based on free market forces, which importantly rests on the invisible hand or forces of competition, and on the other hand, it also brings in features from planned economy. So it's a kind of hybrid, and that's why we use the word mixed, because it takes in some features of market and some features of planned. So the form it takes in today's society or today's economy, today's world, are mainly, we have coexistence of private and public sectors. Free market forces of demand and supply are allowed, but at the same time, the government controls economic activities. The government takes certain decisions which are not interfering too much into the day-to-day or private lives of people as consumers, producers. At the same time, it is overall restricting, controlling, and monitoring the economy. It could take the form of various bodies, various legislation, you can say commissions, restrictive trade practices that we find today, even in market economies at times. What we find today is most of the economies are not fitting into the traditional pure capitalist model or the traditional pure command economy model. So the features that are typical of either a capitalist society, capitalist system, or the typical features of a command system are almost non-existent today in any country, because there's a convergence of today's societies, today's nations and economies towards the mixed system. So where you had a pure capitalist system suggesting certain typical features and the pure communist system and pure command economy, they are moving further and further away from these and coming more towards the mixed. So although market economies do allow free market forces to operate in competition, it's still at times heavily restricted by government registration and restrictive trade practices, etc. On the other hand, typically communist countries or well-known communist countries, whether it is People's Republic of China or Libya or former USSR, they have been and they are continually in a process of liberalization and coming towards free market forces, more and more use of competition and free markets in most production sectors. Now, modern economic theories and present-day real-world systems have some common shortcomings. These shortcomings are becoming more and more obvious and more common in today's economies. Shortcomings include neglect of the human factor. Human values, moral values, and human well-being are very often neglected in most economies today, most nations today, whether they have adopted the capitalist system or the communist system. And this is one of the, we can say, point that has to be emphasized and avoided. Another aspect is that a lot of practices and policies are against basic norms of social justice or fairness. This could take the form of inequalities, this could take the form of exploitative practices, or this could take the form of heavy taxation of low-income groups. Today's nations, today's economic policies and practices usually breed economic inequality. It has been found in most countries that the inequality between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor, and the different classes of society is not only continuing, but it is increasing. So the poor are becoming poorer, the rich are becoming richer, and there's emergence for middle class in most societies. Economies a lot of times perpetuate exploitation of the socially and economically disadvantaged. The poor are very often not getting opportunity, so it's unequal opportunity and unequal conditions. The class system is thus, being perpetuated, and the inequalities are growing wider and wider. That's an observation in most countries today. As I mentioned before, some basic moral values and social norms are neglected. Now, it has been observed that a lot of capitalist countries in particular have faced economic prosperity and have grown phenomenally from very backward to average to very advanced and rich nations of today. In that sense, capitalism has proved to be useful and productive and beneficial to these countries. But at the same time, what is observed is certain shortcomings that we just mentioned have caused these countries to face a lot of suffering, the masses of the countries to face different kinds of sufferings. For example, there is economic instability, wide fluctuations in economic activities, in the cycles, business cycles, repeated depressions, recessions followed by depressions, and economic recovery after economic policies being followed, leading to boom expansion, but then again severe recession and depression being faced, leads to major problems faced by the masses, especially the poor. Every period of recession and depression has serious consequences for the economy, for the people of the country, for rich and poor, but very often the poor are more adversely affected. Also, the lack of moral norms and the overemphasis on materialism, which was mentioned before, has seen and has been accompanied by a breakdown of the family as an institution in a lot of these countries, inequality and concentration of economic power with its moral dimension, unemployment, and resentment among the poorer classes, which again in a lot of countries leads to crime, leads to class conflict, leads to governments being thrown out of power in a number of times, in a number of countries. Now, what stands out here are lessons to be learned for the rest of the world, for countries that have not treaded that path. There are lessons to be learned, as we said, and roads to be avoided and alternatives to be pondered on. Development, growth need not be sacrificed, while accepting or adopting the good tenets, the good features of each system. Moral norms, social justice need not be forgotten. That's what has to be, taken care of. Priority to the human factor in economic processes and economic decisions is what is an important basis of benevolent economics. Human being is the center of all this discussion, all this study, not wealth. That is our, main belief. Man has been created for ibadah. Allah has sent human beings on this earth for His worship and we need to bear that in mind in all our dealings, all our activities, all our transactions. Distribution of wealth and economic power is another point to be kept in mind, noted and improved, not worsened. Development which is taking place at the cost of equality, at the cost of welfare of the poor, of the needy, perpetuation of inequalities and increase of inequalities are not a favorable consequence or are not a favorable direction in which any society or economy can move towards. In fact, attempts should be made to reduce these inequalities, to make the poor happier people, to make them better than before, not worse off. Social welfare and helping of needy is also emphasized. Benevolence in dealings and economic transactions, economic interaction must be importantly taken care of. It is important to understand and emphasize that Islam did not deter or did not talk against or did not forbid interest and speculation in these details before setting up or before emphasizing an overall background of moral values. Speaking of a just economic system, it is not for human intelligence to devise a morally just society, a morally just economic system. For this, we have to go back on the revelation in the Divine Quran. Allah teaches us a morality and importance of social norms before teaching us economic principles. There is importance laid on moral values towards fellow human beings, emphasis on mercy, benevolence, honesty in our dealings. In the Quran, there has been a lot of importance and emphasis on the role of charity and forgiveness in our dealings, including forgiveness of debt as far as possible to the debtor who is in financial difficulty or has had faced business losses and is unable to give all or in full or part of the amount. Now, we need to understand then that this overall framework or overall importance of morality was laid down before specific rulings were made in the Quran against usury or in favor of zakats or any community action, community attitude towards these rulings. Now, in Surah Baqarah, initially importance was attached to rightful utilization of wealth, concepts of sadaqah, dealings in loans and mercy, forgiveness towards debtors. And it was for the individual to realize the importance of these, to improve, change and make upright, accentuate these feelings of these attitudes towards morality, towards proper use of money, towards economic dealings and transactions, towards his economic interaction with fellow beings, and also in his attitude towards debtors. It was only after Fatah Makkah, when the government, the Islamic State, was rightfully and dutifully established over Makkah and Medina, that the rulings were made for the community as a whole. Specific rulings against usury or riba, specific rulings against zakat, for example. Each and everyone involved in this process of devising a just moral system, a benevolent economy, should have moral values within oneself. And these values alone can help us to understand Islamic economics in its proper perspective. We end this episode today at this point, and we shall continue to discuss this in greater detail in future episodes. Thank you.